Charlie opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but he shut his mouth and walked out of the restaurant when he looked at Claire's enraged face. How dare the boss of a small company be so brazen in front of him? He had decided to go all out with his luck, hadn't he? Claire even had to tiptoe around that bastard. Didn't she know that her husband was the most powerful of them all? Right at this moment, he wanted to reveal his true identity to Claire so desperately. He wanted her to know that she didn't have to worry about their future, and that she didn't need to be bullied and tormented by a lowly boss of a mediocre company. However, he held back the words that came to his lips. Exposing his identity would mean that he had officially accepted the Wade family and would return to their embrace. No, he didn't want to go back. Standing outside the restaurant, Charlie looked up toward the second floor and then retrieved his phone and called Anthony, the Wade family's butler. Check the background and details of the Millennium Enterprise and also their clients and their recent projects. Anthony's courteous voice resonated from the other end of the line. Young Master, Millennium Enterprise's major clients are mostly small businesses under the Wade family. They handled some of the real estate projects from the Emgren Group this year. Really? Charlie snorted. It turned out that Peter Murray was nothing but a nobody who ate the scraps off his butt. Charlie wanted to laugh out loud. He wondered if Peter knew that he was his daddy, who basically supported the foundation of his company. How would he feel after insulting him like that? With this thought lingering in his mind, he said to Anthony, I want to teach Millennium Enterprise a lesson. How may I help you, young master? Withdraw all collaborations with the company. I'm sick of it. Oh, did the company piss you off in some way? Do you want me to deal with its boss directly? I can make him disappear into thin air right away. Charlie chuckled. Oh, please, we are a civilized society. There are so many ways other than killing and fighting. How can he feel the pain if you kill him anyway? No, I want him to go bankrupt and lead a miserable life for the rest of his life. Okay, young master. Please give me a few minutes. I'll get it done. For Anthony, making Millennium Enterprise go bankrupt was as simple as squeezing an ant. Charlie ended the call and looked upstairs again. Claire was still apologizing to Peter while Peter leaned back against the chair like a cocky dog, mumbling something. He was probably cursing him right now. He sat on the side of the road and waited lazily for his wife to come out. Charlie, dressed in a normal t-shirt and jeans, looked like an ordinary passerby that no one would bat an eye at. However, an ordinary guy like him could transform the renowned boss in Oris Hill into a pauper with just one simple phone call. Claire's continual bowing and apologizing to Peter slightly smoothed his grimace. Then both Claire and Peter exited the restaurant, Peter's face still flushed and aching from the scalding. He glared at Charlie, who was sitting by the road, and said to Claire, Claire, I'll forgive that loser husband of yours for your sake today. I would like to invite you to dinner tomorrow night and we'll discuss the collaboration matter again. His indifferent and casual look was simply to impress Claire, but deep inside him, he was burning in rage. If it wasn't for Claire apologizing on Charlie's behalf, he would have called for someone to come and beat the crap out of Charlie. However, he didn't intend to let Charlie off the hook so easily. When he finally got a taste of the beautiful Claire tomorrow, he would get someone to destroy him. Charlie walked over and said to Claire, Darling, let's go home. There's nothing to talk about with this bastard who is about to go bankrupt, let alone collaboration. Peter's expression shifted into a furious grimace, and he said, Asshole, you do want to die today, don't you? Did you just say that I'm about to go bankrupt? Believe it or not, I'll kill you right away. You are still standing in one piece now entirely because of Claire. Charlie curled his lips into a smirk and flung his hand across Peter's face. Slap. Peter was stunned as he covered his cheek with his hand. After a short while, he yelled at Charlie. You piece of thrash! How dare you hit me? Charlie sneered before he said, Why? Why wouldn't I dare hit you? If I want to hit you, you'll just have to deal with it. After that, Charlie raised his hand and slapped Peter again. At this time, Peter's cheek was already swollen. Even though Claire was also very disgusted with Peter, Charlie had already slapped him twice. Therefore, she was a little worried, and she hurriedly said, Charlie, what are you doing? Didn't I tell you not to recklessly start a fight with anyone? She was not worried about herself, but she was worried that Peter would exact revenge on Charlie. After all, Peter was still the boss of a reputable company. How could he possibly keep calm after getting hit by Charlie? True enough, Peter was completely annoyed and irritated at this time. He pointed his finger at Claire before he said, "You, the one with the last name Wilson. If you do not compensate and appease me after what your husband has done today, I'll kill him. I'll make sure that he disappears from Oris Hill immediately." As soon as Claire heard the word compensate, she started to lose her temper immediately. "You're so shameless." "Shameless?" Peter snorted coldly. "Don't you think I don't know that the Wilson family has already kicked you out of the family a long time ago? Do you really think that you're still the young lady of the Wilson family? Let me tell you something. I am Peter Murray, and I have a very established reputation in Oris Hill. If you do not want me to destroy your entire family, then you'd better crawl into my bed and try to satisfy me tonight. If I'm satisfied with your performance, I could still force myself to forgive you." Claire was trembling with anger, and she replied in a sharp manner, "Peter, you're really a shameless bastard. I have all the power and wealth in the world, so what's wrong with me being shameless?" Peter asked. At this time, Charlie stood up before he said, "You with the last name Murray, listen up. You're already bankrupt, so don't tell me about how powerful or wealthy you are." "What did you just say?" Peter was taken aback, and he did not know how to retaliate at all. He was about to yell at Charlie when his cell phone started ringing again. Peter did not want to answer his phone, but his phone kept ringing continuously. "Hello? What do you want?" "Mr. Murray, I have bad news for you. The shareholders of the company that wanted to work with us have suddenly changed their mind. They want to withdraw their partnership with us." "What?" The expression on Peter's face changed immediately. "I'll give them a call immediately." "Wait a minute, Mr. Murray. They are not the only ones withdrawing all cooperation with us. Emgren Group, who has always had a long-term partnership with our company, had also called to withdraw their partnership with the company. Moreover, all the other directors have also called to request to cancel all the contracts that they have with us." Peter was so stunned that he was completely at a loss for words. However, the voice on the other end of the line continued speaking. "Moreover, 4 other companies have already called to ask Millennium Enterprise to pay a huge sum for liquidated damages. Mr. Zenith, the CEO from Prime Financial Group, also called because he wanted to recover the $280 million loan that we took from them. He wants us to transfer that sum of money to their bank account tomorrow. Otherwise, he'll lodge a legal proceeding against us, and all of the real estate that we have under construction will be seized immediately. Besides that, the City Union Bank, the Construction Bank, the Industrial and Commercial Bank, and the Agricultural Bank have also called to collect the debts that we owe them. If we do not settle all the previous loans that we have taken from them by noon tomorrow, they will auction off all the company's assets." Peter was sweating profusely at this time, and he was turning pale as he started to break out in cold sweat. What was going on with the world? Was he having a nightmare? Why did it seem as though all the unfortunate events were coming at him all of a sudden? It was as if all those companies had made a pact to deal with him. What was happening? What was really happening? After being dealt a series of blows, Peter started to sweat so profusely that he could not even stand straight, and he had to use the wall to steady himself. Claire did not know who had called Peter, but she could see the change of the expression on Peter's face after answering the call. He looked as though he was going to collapse immediately. "Charlie, do you think Peter is unwell?" Charlie smiled before he replied, "Yes, perhaps there is something wrong with his brain and he can't remember who he really is." Peter's secretary continued panicking over the other end of the line, but Peter could not hear whatever she was saying at all. He could only hear a ringing sound in his ear, and all he could think of was what Charlie was saying earlier. "You're already bankrupt!" Peter was sweating all over, and he raised his head in horror as he stared at Charlie with a firm expression on his face. How did Charlie predict all of this? He was really bankrupt. Peter collapsed to the ground out of desperation. Charlie glanced at him with a cold and indifferent expression on his face before he said to Claire, "Let's go." Claire did not know what was happening to Peter at this time, but she did not want to have anything to do with Peter anymore. Therefore, she turned around to follow after Charlie immediately. At this time, Peter suddenly regained his senses, and he raised his head as he watched Charlie walk away from him. Peter suddenly stood up as he rushed towards Charlie without any hesitation at all. Just as Charlie was about to get into his car, Peter stopped him, and he stared at him with bloodshot eyes. Claire was shocked to see the crazy look on Peter's face, and she subconsciously took a step back as she hid behind Charlie. "You did this, right? You were the one who did all this, right?" Peter stared at Charlie as he asked in frustration. Charlie simply glared at Peter as he yelled, "Go away!" His tone was sharp and cold, as though he was berating a dog. A crowd of passers-by exchanged glances with one another at this time. Oh my, wasn't that the boss of Millennium Enterprise? Why would a young man who was dressed so casually have the audacity to yell at Mr. Murray in public? Was he sick and tired of living in Oris Hill? However, unexpectedly, as the crowd of onlookers continued looking at them, Peter suddenly knelt down in front of Charlie as he cried and said, "Mr. Wade, please let me off. I know I was wrong. Please just let me off this time." The crowd of people were silent as they were all staring at the scene before them in disbelief. The boss of Millennium Enterprise, Peter Murray, was actually kneeling down in front of an ordinary young man. Claire was also stunned at this time because she did not expect Peter to kneel down before Charlie. "Mr. Wade, I know I was wrong. I deserve to die. I shouldn't have had any bad thoughts about Claire. I'll repent and I promise I'll never do it again in the future. Please forgive me and just leave me a way out. Please don't push me to a dead end." Peter continued begging as he kept slapping himself hard in the face. Charlie had a straight expression on his face as he watched Peter slap himself at least a dozen times. After that, when Charlie saw that Peter was already bleeding from his mouth, he simply replied indifferently, "Mr. Murray, I have no idea what you're talking about." "Mr. Wade, Millennium Enterprise is already bankrupt. I do not have a single penny left, and I also owe hundreds of millions of dollars. I will never be able to repay this debt, not even in my next life." Peter continued kneeling and begging without the demeanor of a successful person that he had not too long ago. All this happened so suddenly, and it was too coincidental. As soon as Charlie said that he would go bankrupt, all the bad news flooded in, and it seemed as though he would definitely go bankrupt tomorrow. All this felt like a coincidence, but how could there be such a coincidence? Peter had a vague feeling that all of these were definitely related to Charlie. Therefore, he could only kneel in front of Charlie because he no longer cared about his own reputation. Claire did not know what the other party had told Peter over the phone. Therefore, she could only say in surprise, "Peter, isn't your company doing well? What are you talking about? Besides that, even if you're facing bankruptcy, what has it to do with Charlie?" Peter knelt on the ground as he said, "Claire, I'm so sorry for offending you a while ago. I admit my mistake and I'm begging for your forgiveness. My company called me earlier to tell me that one of my biggest customers had called to terminate their contract with us. Moreover, all the banks have just called to collect the money that I have borrowed from them. I am done for this time. Please help put in a good word for me in front of Mr. Wade, otherwise there isn't a way for me to survive in this world anymore." Claire was taken aback at this time, and she simply replied, "I think you've made a mistake, Peter. I don't think Charlie holds so much power." Charlie also replied faintly, "Peter, everything in this world has its cause and effect. It's useless to ask me for help. You should reflect on yourself." After that, Charlie led Claire into the car before he got into the car. After Charlie drove away, Peter was still kneeling on the side of the road with a blank expression on his face. A large crowd of people had already gathered around him as they stared at him in surprise. At this time, the crowd of people could not help but whisper among themselves. However, Peter could not take it anymore. Even though he was a highly successful and well-respected person today, he would become a beggar on the streets tomorrow. No, he would not even be a beggar. He did not have any money at all, and he owed people more than hundreds of millions of dollars in liquidated damages. At this time, Peter's cell phone started ringing again, and his assistant's flustered voice sounded on the other end of the line. "Mr. Murray, the usury company has called to tell us that their interest rate will increase tenfold and that they'll be collecting their money tomorrow. If you don't have the money to pay them, they said they'll chop your right hand off." "Mr. Murray, the landlord of the office building we're renting has also called to inform that the rental will be increased 20-fold, and if we refuse to agree to that rental rate, we'll have to move out tomorrow." "Mr. Murray." Peter dropped his cell phone to the ground and he knelt on the ground with a dull expression on his face. After a short while, Peter suddenly screamed, "Oh my God! Who on earth did I offend?" He hit the ground frantically with his hands and he started knocking his forehead against the ground. Blood started gushing out immediately. Peter could no longer bear the huge blow and he suffered a nervous breakdown. He started foaming at the mouth and his eyes rolled to the back of his head before he fainted. Charlie had a calm expression on his face as he drove. The more Claire thought about it, the more she felt something had gone amiss. Therefore, she quickly asked Charlie, "What did you do to Peter? Why does it seem like he was so afraid of you?" At this time, Charlie replied lightly, "I didn't do anything to him. I've been waiting for you outside all this time, so what could I possibly have done to him? He's probably in this state because he has offended too many people in his life. That's why everyone is out to get him." Claire was still a little suspicious, but she thought Charlie's explanation made sense. Peter had probably offended a very powerful man, and he was simply putting the blame on Charlie. When she thought about it, she felt a little angry, and she said, "Well, Peter's really a very shameless person. He deserves to go bankrupt." Charlie smiled. Indeed, he felt that Peter deserved it. Since he had provoked him, then bankruptcy was the best punishment for him. Otherwise, Peter would continue abusing his power against the weaker parties. Claire sighed at this time before she said, "It seems like I'll have to find a new business partner to talk about our collaboration then." When Charlie heard Claire's words, he reminded himself to ask Doris to make sure that Grand Group would give more work and collaboration proposals to his wife. When they both arrived at their house, Claire was still telling Charlie about her next development plan for the studio. However, as soon as they entered the house, Jacob rubbed his hands and walked towards them immediately. After that, he glanced at them with an awkward expression on his face before he said, Claire, your mother wants you to go back and work for Wilson Group tomorrow." "What?" Claire exclaimed with a shocked expression on her face. Charlie also frowned as he said, "Didn't we already decide to draw a clear line with the Wilson family?" "Oh." Jacob looked very embarrassed, and he could only say helplessly, "I don't know what's going on with your mother, but she insists that you return to work for Wilson Group. So—" Before Jacob could finish speaking, Claire asked her mom angrily, "Mom, the Wilson family bullied my father and they tried to snatch Charlie's villa from us. Why should we go back to work for them?" When Claire suddenly questioned her, Charlie's mother-in-law, Elaine, lost her temper and said, "You're still the granddaughter of the Wilson family no matter what happens. Besides, your grandmother has already apologized to me and admitted that she acted that way in a moment of confusion. She said that Harold was the one who instigated the discord, and she has already punished him severely. What else are you dissatisfied about?" Claire replied angrily, "So what if they apologize to us? I understand my grandmother's character and personality. Even if she apologized, it was definitely not a sincere apology. She's only apologizing because she wants me to return to Wilson Group and fix the collaboration issues with Grand Group." Elaine tried to persuade Claire at this time. "Don't think so badly of your grandmother. We're still family no matter what happens. How could you still hate her after so long?" "I am not related to anyone in the Wilson family," Claire replied angrily before she continued. "I'll never go back to work for the Wilson Group." "What do you mean by that?" Elaine said in dissatisfaction. "Your grandmother has already realized her mistake. Do you really want an old woman like her to apologize to you?" After that, Elaine continued speaking. "In order to prove her sincerity, your grandmother has also given me a gold necklace and 2 jade bracelets. Mom, you can just admit that the only reason you want me to go back and work for the Wilson Group is because you're greedy and you want to keep the jewelry Grandma has given you," Claire replied in a frustrated tone before she ignored Elaine and walked to her bedroom immediately. Charlie followed behind Claire without saying anything at all. At this time, Elaine started complaining in the living room. "Look at your daughter." Unexpectedly, Jacob ignored her too as he turned around and walked away. In the bedroom, Claire was still very frustrated and she could not help but complain to Charlie. "I really did not expect the Wilson family to use jewelry to win over my mother. Don't you know that my mom is always very materialistic? As soon as the Wilson family gave her some jewelry and said some nice things to her, she got overwhelmed by greed and instantly forgot how they had insulted us back then." Even though Charlie was also very unhappy, he knew that he should not be speaking ill of his mother-in-law. Therefore, he could only persuade Claire, When we fell out with the Wilson family, your mother was not there with us. Therefore, she doesn't know how despicable the Wilson family are." At this time, Claire quickly asked Charlie, "Then, what should I do if my mother wants me to go back and work for Wilson Group?" Charlie replied, "You should consider what you really want and make this decision on your own. I will support whatever decision you make." Claire nodded before she replied firmly, "I think so too. I want to start my own business so I'll be able to succeed based on my own abilities." Charlie smiled before he replied, "I think that's a good idea. It would be great for you to start your own business and advance in your own career." As they continued talking, Charlie thought that he would invite Graham from the Quinton family, Isaac from Shangri-La, the mobster boss, Orville, Warnia from the Song family, and Zeke from the White family out for a meal so that he could introduce Claire to them. After all, he needed them to help him to look out for his wife when she started her own business in the future. As he thought about this, Charlie suddenly received a phone call from Warnia. Warnia greeted him respectfully over the phone and said, "Mr. Wade, it's me, Warnia. I was just wondering if you're busy now." Charlie replied, "No, Miss Song, what is the matter?" Warnia quickly replied, "Mr. Wade, my grandfather has fallen ill recently and no one can tell what's wrong with him. I was wondering if you could make some time to come over to my grandfather's house and take a look at him." After that, Warnia said again, "Please don't worry. We'll definitely pay you well for your consultation fees." Charlie thought about it for a moment. Warnia was the eldest daughter of one of the most prestigious families in Orris Hill. When Claire started her own business in the future, he might need to ask Warnia for help from time to time. Therefore, Charlie quickly agreed to help her without any hesitation at all. "All right then, I will come over tonight." Warnia quickly replied gratefully, "Okay, I'll pick you up tonight." "Okay." After hanging up the phone, Charlie turned around and told Claire, "I will be out with a friend tonight, so I won't be having dinner at home." Claire nodded, and she did not ask much. However, she reminded Charlie, "Do not give anyone any more feng shui advice when you're out. Otherwise, you will be in a lot of trouble if anyone calls you a liar." Charlie smiled before he replied, "Don't worry, my wife. I know what I should be doing." Later that night, Warnia came all the way to pick Charlie up. Upon seeing Charlie, Warnia arched her hands respectfully before him and greeted, "Mr. Wade, I'm really sorry to trouble you." Charlie smiled slightly before he said, "Miss Song, you don't have to be so polite." After that, Charlie noticed that Warnia was wearing a diamond necklace around her neck. At this time, he asked out of curiosity, "This is the diamond necklace that you lost previously, isn't it?" Warnia nodded hurriedly before she replied, "Yes, this is the diamond necklace that my mother gave me before she passed away, and it's more important to me than my own life. Therefore, I'm really grateful towards you, because if it wasn't because of you, I would never have gotten it back, Mr. Wade." Charlie smiled before he replied, "Warnia, you have a connection with the diamond necklace. Even if I did not help you, it would have been transferred back to your hands after a short while." Warnia knew that Charlie was only being modest. Therefore, she quickly replied, "Mr. Wade, this is the first time that I've ever seen a really skilled master like you keeping such a low profile and staying so humble." Charlie smiled and said, "Warnia, you don't have to keep praising me. Let's get down to business immediately." Warnia nodded before she said, "Okay, Mr. Wade, please get into the car." Charlie got into Warnia Rolls-Royce before the driver drove the car swiftly to the Song family's mansion in Orris Hill. It was a typical mansion that was renovated magnificently, and it was enclosed within a beautiful garden. The entire villa was filled with classical beauty and really portrayed the owner's elegant taste. Moreover, the mansion occupied a very large area. Since the Song family could own such a large piece of land in Orris Hill, it was obvious that the Song family was really extremely wealthy. Charlie followed slowly behind Warnia as they walked across the courtyard. As soon as he entered the living room, he saw a young man dressed in a suit and a pair of leather shoes walking around with an old man and a much younger girl. "Sister, this is—" The handsome young man looked at Charlie suspiciously. "This is Mr. Wade." Warnia had an uneasy expression on her face, but she maintained her composure as she introduced Charlie to the handsome young man. "Charlie, this is my cousin, Reuben." "Hello," Charlie said as he nodded. "Mr. Wade?" The youth scanned Charlie up and down before he replied sarcastically, "Sister, did you invite this so-called master who looks younger than me to take a look at Grandpa? Don't you think that this is a little too ridiculous?" Charlie was a little annoyed when he heard Reuben's words. On their way home, Warnia had already told Charlie that her grandfather was dying and his life was hanging by a thread now. The younger generation of the Song family had invited countless famous doctors and masters to come over to take a look at their grandfather in hopes that they would be able to make a great contribution if they helped to cure the old man and save his life. After that, they would be able to hope for a bigger share in the Song family's property when their inheritance was allocated. This was especially so for Reuben. Unfortunately, all the famous doctors that he had invited to the Song family mansion had not been able to help the old man at all. Reuben was a little hostile towards Warnia as he glared at her. At this time, Warnia quickly replied, "Brother, Mr. Wade is a very skillful master. When I was plagued with bad luck previously, Mr. Wade was the one who helped me reverse my fortune. He is really a very skillful master in feng shui and metaphysics." Reuben replied with contempt, "Sister, the person that we need to hire to treat Grandpa now is a doctor, not just a feng shui master. Does this young man even have any idea what he's doing?" Charlie was very unhappy at this time. After all, the only reason he had agreed to come here today was because he wanted to show some respect for Warnia. Otherwise, the young master of the Wade family would not even have bothered to step into the Song family mansion. Why would they even be worthy of his presence? Warnia was also furious at this time. "Brother, how could you say such things? You might choose not to believe in someone's ability, but you shouldn't disrespect them just because of that." Reuben snorted coldly before he replied, "Respect? I only respect masters with real talents and skills. I don't think swindlers deserve my respect at all." After that, Reuben pointed at the old man standing next to him before he proudly introduced him. "This is Douglas Simmons, an extremely famous doctor in the South region, and his granddaughter." Charlie was slightly taken aback, and he looked at the people standing before him. The old man and the young girl looked like a grandfather and his granddaughter. However, their dressing was obviously different compared to that of other ordinary people. The old man looked like he was slightly over 60 years old, and he was wearing a bamboo-colored cloth robe with a pair of black-framed, old-fashioned glasses. He had a long white beard, and his eyes were gleaming at this time. The young girl standing next to him looked about 18 or 19 years old, and she was wearing a loose cheongsam. She had short hair with bangs with extremely bright eyes that sparkled upon the reflection of light. The girl had very nice white teeth, and she exuded a cold and mysterious aura around her. Charlie paid more attention to the young girl's appearance because in Oris Hill, there were not many people who could be compared to the top beauty, Claire. Compared to Claire, the young girl's eyes were much sharper, and she looked a little arrogant. When the old man saw Charlie staring at him, Douglas nodded faintly while the young girl was very arrogant, and she did not look at Charlie at all. At this time, Reuben suddenly said to Warnia, "Sister, I think that this young man whom you're referring to as a master should only be in his early 20s. He might not even know anything about yin and yang, and he probably doesn't even know anything about the 5 elements. Who gave him the audacity to call himself a master? If anyone finds out about this, they definitely laugh at us, the Song family, for not choosing to believe in medical skills, but choosing to believe in superstition instead." Reuben was attacking Charlie relentlessly with his words, and Charlie was shocked because he did not know why he had suddenly turned into a liar. At this time, Reuben clasped his fist and bowed slightly in front of the old man before he said, "Dr. Simmons, I'm sorry that my sister is so ignorant. Please ignore her and you can proceed to take care of this medical emergency." Douglas was very humble, and he quickly replied, "Being young doesn't necessarily mean that one has no true talents. Mr. Song, please do not have so many doubts and suspicions about this young man here." Reuben sighed before he replied, "You don't know why I am acting this way, Dr. Simmons. My sister has already been deceived a couple of times not too long ago." The expression on Warnia's face immediately changed before she blurted out, "Brother, what do you mean by that?" Reuben asked, "Did I say anything wrong? I heard that you were also deceived by a so-called feng shui expert from Hong Kong who goes by the name Master Leonard. Did that happen or not?" You Warnia felt very uncomfortable at this time. She had to admit that the incident involving Master Leonard was indeed her own mistake. She really did not expect to be fooled by a swindler who came all the way from Hong Kong. Fortunately, Charlie was present at that time, or she would have definitely been plagued with bad luck and bad fortune otherwise. However, Reuben did not know about Charlie's abilities. Therefore, he dared to speak about Charlie in this manner. At this time, Reuben spoke to Charlie again. "Young man, I don't know how you've managed to deceive Warnia or what you've said to her, but I'll never allow you to lie to the Song family. Dr. Simmons comes from 3 generations of famous doctors, and you're just a young man who probably doesn't even know what you are doing. I advise you to leave as soon as possible instead of courting trouble for yourself." Warnia had a very ugly expression on her face, but there was no way for her to refute Reuben's words. After all, Charlie was very young indeed, and it would be very difficult for her to convince others of his skills. In fact, she would not have believed Charlie either if she had not seen and experienced Charlie's extraordinary skills for herself. Warnia was afraid that she would cause a huge commotion if she were to continue talking and bragging about Charlie's feng shui skills at this time. However, Charlie remained calm and composed. He simply replied to Reuben with a smile on his face. "Ha ha ha, I'm sorry, but please do not worry about someone like me. I'll just be standing aside to watch how Dr. Simmons is going to save lives with his healing hands." "All right then, since you know your own place." At this time, a middle-aged man stepped forward and said, "Warnia, Reuben, it looks like your grandpa is not going to make it." Douglas quickly asked, "Where's the old man? Please lead me to him so I can take a look at his condition." "He's in his room at the back of the house. Please follow me," Reuben replied, as he hurriedly walked ahead to lead Douglas and his granddaughter to his grandfather. Warnia hurriedly beckoned for Charlie to follow behind them. Everyone quickly arrived at a very luxurious and vintage bedroom at the back of the saw, and they could see a dying old man lying on a bed frame made out of yellow rosewood. The old man looked very haggard, and his brows were tightly knitted together as though he was enduring a great deal of pain. Douglas quickly said, "The old man is in a very critical condition. Please allow my granddaughter and I to begin treatment immediately." Reuben hurriedly replied, "Dr. Simmons, please go ahead and treat my grandfather." Douglas nodded, but instead of attending to the old man himself, he stood by the side of the bed as he beckoned for the young woman to take action. The young girl placed a bag of silver needles on the bedside table before she started piercing the needles into the old man. The young girl was very proficient in performing acupuncture, and her skills would probably be better than any old physicians who had practiced medicine for more than 20 or 30 years. This was the reason why the members of the Song family felt comfortable enough to allow her to perform the acupuncture on the old man. The young girl was not only very beautiful and charming, but was also very skilled and meticulous when performing acupuncture. Hence, Charlie was not only impressed with the young girl's external beauty and appearance, but he was also very impressed with her inner qualities. Charlie could tell that the young girl was an expert from the way she handled the needles when she was treating the old man. According to the Nine Heavens Profound book, there were 5 branches under Taoism, namely mountain, medicine, life, phase, and divination. Under the cultivation of these 5 branches, there was some cultivation of aura in the energy of the possessor. At one glance, Charlie could tell that Douglas and his granddaughter were the descendants of the word mountain. The word mountain was mainly based on medical skills. Firstly, they had to learn basic medicine before they started practicing martial arts. After that, their skills were based on a combination of medical and martial arts skills. However, even if Douglas and his granddaughter were descendants and fellow practitioners, they were still human and had mortal bodies. All mortal bodies can only exert aura. Charlie had been reborn through the reincarnation of spiritual energy, and his physical body had already long surpassed that of a mortal. Even though it seemed as though the spiritual energy cultivated under Taoism is only a little different from the aura in Charlie's body, there is vast difference between the two. In layman's terms, the comparison is similar to the differences between coal and diamond. Even though both coal and diamond possess the same origins, they are completely different in nature. Coal can only be used as raw material with very limited energy at a low cost, whereas diamonds draw a lot of energy and cost 1,000 times more than coal itself. Many descendants of the 5 branches of Taoism have tried to cultivate their energy throughout their entire lifetime, but have only been able to cultivate nothing more than a little spiritual energy. Once any of the descendants cultivated that little bit of spiritual energy, they would be able to prolong their own lives. However, 99% of Taoist disciples would never be able to cultivate this spiritual energy even before they die. "Thank you for your hard work, Doctor," the middle-aged man said immediately. After that, Reuben hurriedly invited Douglas and his granddaughter to sit and have a cup of tea. After a short while, the young girl took the needles out before she took the teacup in her hand and finished the cup of tea at one go. Even though the young girl had only performed an acupuncture for the old man, the color on his face had already returned, and his breathing was more even at this time. Everyone in the Song family was extremely happy. The young girl was also very content at this time. After drinking the cup of tea, the young girl stared at Charlie with a contemptuous expression on her face, as though telling him, "Look, I've already cured the old man." Charlie did not say anything, and he had a very straight expression on his face. In fact, if her spiritual energy was very well mastered, she would not be as tired as she would not need to put much effort into administering her skills at all. However, Charlie did not point it out because he did not want to mess with this young girl. Charlie turned around to look at the old man, but after seeing the color on his face, he frowned immediately. Even though the old man's condition seemed to improve massively after the young girl performed acupuncture for him, this was only superficial. Lord Song had a lot of old injuries and wounds on his body, and his muscles and veins had already been ruined a lot time ago. He also suffered from a blood deficiency syndrome, and some of his organs had been somewhat exhausted because his organs had been overworking. The young girl's diagnosis and treatment only cured his symptoms without getting to the root of the cause. Lord Song looked much better externally, but his real condition was currently suppressed. After 2 days, he would definitely suffer a relapse, and at that time, his symptoms would definitely be more severe and very life-threatening to him. The so-called genius young doctor was only allowing him to live at least 2 to 3 days longer. As soon as he saw this, Charlie decided that he had to take action immediately. He stepped forward before he picked up a silver needle by the bed and said, "The old man still has a hidden disease in his body. Please allow me to perform acupuncture for him." When the middle-aged man saw Charlie attempting to perform acupuncture for the old man, he was extremely shocked, and he wanted to stop him immediately. However, the man could only frown, and he froze in place when he saw how skillful Charlie was. At this time, Reuben lost his temper, and he yelled at Charlie, "Hey! What do you think you're doing right now?" Charlie simply replied, "Lord Song has an old illness that had already been pent up in his body for a long time. I will try to get rid of the illness for him so his internal organs can be reshaped and function properly again. Otherwise, he won't be able to live for more than 3 days." "What are you talking about?" Reuben was extremely angry at this time, and he continued shouting at Charlie, "Are you cursing my grandfather? I'm going to kill you!" Warnia hurriedly stepped forward before she said, "Brother, please do not cause any trouble. Just give Mr. Wade the opportunity to treat Grandpa." "Am I the one who is causing trouble right now?" Reuben replied angrily. "You can rest assured leaving Grandpa in his hands, but I do not have your courage. Are you trying to kill Grandpa?" Warnia replied in a cold manner, "I trust Mr. Wade's skills. I'll take full responsibility if Mr. Wade makes any mistakes." "How can you take any responsibility for this?" Charlie did not even raise his head, but he simply continued performing the acupuncture on Lord Song. He moved his hands in a very delicate manner before supplementing his moves with a little aura before piercing the old man's body with the needles. When the young girl saw that Charlie was really performing acupuncture for Lord Song, the expression on her face changed immediately. She quickly stepped forward to stop Charlie. "Hey, young man, stop whatever you're doing. If anything happens to him, you won't be able to shoulder this responsibility." At this time, Douglas suddenly stopped her and said in a deep voice, "Stop it! Do not disturb him!" The young girl replied anxiously, "Grandpa, if he makes a mistake, he'll only cause more harm to the patient." Douglas replied in a deep voice, "Zyla, look carefully at the technique he's using to administer the needles." When Zyla heard her grandfather's words, she quickly turned around to observe Charlie's hand. Zyla was surprised and dumbfounded when she saw that Charlie was using the same technique that she had used earlier. She hastily replied, "How can he be so shameless? He's using the same technique that I was using earlier. Did he copy and steal my technique by watching me earlier?" Douglas had a very calm expression on his face at this time. He only spoke up a few seconds later. "Look clearly again. Pay close attention to his gestures and movement." The young girl looked at Charlie for a little longer, and she muttered in shock. What is he?" Zyla immediately recognized that the acupuncture technique Charlie was using was indeed the same Heavenly Thousand Needles acupuncture technique that had been passed down from generation to generation in the Simmons family. Even though his moves looked almost the same as her acupuncture method earlier, after taking a closer look, Zyla could tell that there were some differences in their techniques. Was this an upgraded version of the Heavenly Thousand Needles acupuncture technique? Zyla was horrified, and she quickly asked her grandfather, "Grandpa, how could he possibly know of our family's acupuncture technique?" Douglas simply nodded because he was already mesmerized by Charlie's skills at this time. He continued watching Charlie with a look of admiration on his face before he replied, "Unexpectedly, this young man seems to be a master of a combination of medicine and martial arts. His hand was very steady when he inserted the needle, and only a person with more than 50 years of experience would ever be able to have such steady internal aura. I really did not expect someone as young as this man to be able to surpass my skills at this age." The young girl was very unconvinced at this time. "Grandpa, I'm certain that I'll definitely be able to surpass him." Douglas sighed as he continued staring at Charlie in admiration. "If I am not mistaken, this young man is performing the full set of the Heavenly Thousand Needles acupuncture technique. There are a few steps of the Heavenly Thousand Needles acupuncture technique that has been missing from the Simmons family for many generations. I really did not expect there to be someone capable of performing the complete technique today." After that, Douglas glanced at his granddaughter before he said, "Let's not talk about you first. Even my own spiritual energy cannot be compared to this young man's, even if I were to practice for another 50 years. "It's just a few more acupuncture steps. How much difference can it make?" the young girl muttered under her breath. She had to prove that she was superior to Charlie. "Grandpa, so what if he knows a few more steps to the Heavenly Thousand Needles acupuncture technique? I had the highest grade in medical school, and I am well versed in acupuncture and massage techniques. I don't believe that he'll be better than me in everything. I am going to demand for a one-on-one competition with him later." Douglas could only shake his head helplessly when he saw his granddaughter's aggressive reaction. "I don't think you'll ever be able to defeat him." After a short while, Charlie was finally done performing acupuncture for the old man. After that, Charlie said lightly, "Lord Song will wake up in less than half an hour. After the acupuncture that I've performed for him today, I can guarantee that he'll live a healthy life for at least another 5 years." Reuben could not stop himself from blurting out, "You really are full of rubbish. The most prestigious American doctor had already said that my grandfather will only be able to live for another month or less. Do you really think you have the ability to extend my grandfather's life for another 5 years? How can you be so full of yourself?" Charlie replied in a cold manner, "Because I am Charlie Wade." "Boo," Reuben sneered. "You're not a master and you're not a doctor. If anything happens to my grandfather, I'll make sure that you pay for your actions today." Douglas' granddaughter also stepped up and said unceremoniously, "Hey, who are you and which medical clinic or hospital are you from? Where did you learn medicine from?" Charlie turned around and replied, "I'm not from any medical clinic or hospital and I did not learn medicine." The young girl was very surprised, and she continued asking, "What? That's impossible. Where did you learn this acupuncture technique from then?" Charlie smiled before he said, "That is my own personal matter, and I do not wish to reply to that question." The young girl reluctantly said, "This is my family's ancestral acupuncture method that has been passed down for many generations. I have to find out where you learned it from so others will not steal my family's technique and pass it off as their own." "Zyla, don't be rude to Mr. Wade," Douglas reprimanded his granddaughter immediately. After that, he stepped forward before he spoke to Charlie in a respectful manner. "Mr. Wade, my granddaughter lost her parents when she was just a young girl. I was the one who brought her up, so please forgive her if she was disrespectful to you." After that, Douglas continued yelling at Zyla. "Aren't you going to apologize to Mr. Wade now? Can't you see that Mr. Wade's acupuncture skills and technique are better than our family's technique? He's performing the original and well-perfected Heavenly Thousand Needles acupuncture technique. Moreover, can't you see the massive improvement in Lord Song's condition after his treatment?"